Okay, we are off.
Okay.
Welcome
Okay.
to the podcast, Shiloh Minor. Am I saying your
Thank you.
name correctly?
Oh yeah. Perfectly. Yep. Shiloh Minor.
Awesome. Welcome. And thank you so much for gifting me and the listeners your time. I say it ad nauseum, but I say it because I believe it to be true. Time is the most valuable thing that we have. So thank you for yours today. It means so much to me. And I'm so excited to dive into so much with you. But before I hog all of the air in the room, I do want to spend, or sorry, I do want to give you some space to not only update the listeners, or educate listeners, I should say, but update me on what's transpired, what's brought you to here geographically, and also with the work that you do. You and I met years ago, very quickly and briefly through a friend, and lucky enough to have reconnected with you. Sorry, I'm just going to turn that off. So yeah, update me. What are you doing? Why are you doing it? And how did you get to here today?
Okay. Well, thank you for your time as well. I couldn't agree more. Time is scarce and precious, and
Mm.
I'll turn 40 this year, and I have all of a sudden become paranoid about my retirement because we're all going to get old. So it's
Right.
a good reminder, right? To think about the future and use your precious time wisely. Okay, so how did I get here? So I live in rural Nova Scotia, a couple hours away from Brad now, and we met on the West Coast in Vancouver, where the housing prices are astronomical. So we fled with the rest of them,
Yeah.
and it's beautiful out here. Absolutely love it. Built a house with my husband, and I have two little boys, 3 and 5 years old. And like so many people, I had found this amazing man to marry, thought it'd be wonderful. And then after two kids, we started fighting a lot and not doing so well. And I didn't know what to do about it. I had read a lot of books on relationships my whole life. I've always just been a hobbyist interested in how people work and why they do what they do. So I thought I had it all sorted out, like a lot of people before they actually have children. And then things got hard. And I hired a parent coach because I was just like, I wanted to be an attachment parent. I saw it as my vocation and my calling. I was a stay at home mom. I'm going to do this thing. And it wasn't going so well. Anyway, this parent coach taught me about conscious living essentially, that I'm not a victim. I have nobody else to blame for how I feel. I'm an adult. I can do whatever I want at any moment. And it was totally life changing. Like, I'm so grateful that I reached out for help and I had that experience. Um, Anyways, as I worked with her, I started kind of wanting to coach the people on our group calls together. I
Mm-hmm.
wanted to rephrase what I said. I wanted to help them out. And I was loving it. I love the whole environment. And now I'm a relationship coach, so I'll get to that. I'm a relationship coach for women who want to fix their marriages, but their husbands don't want to go to couples therapy or they don't want to talk about it, just nothing's working. And I was talking to this parent coach about how I'd done all these different things in my life, but none of them really stuck. Like, I was a Montessori preschool teacher. I taught English in Japan. I taught early childhood education at the Arctic College in Nunavut. And I liked all these things, but I kind of like, it just didn't really light me up. It just felt like a job. I mean, there was really amazing aspects to all of that, but I
Mm-hmm.
didn't have the same drive. And I was speaking with her about that, and she says, "Well, have you thought about being a coach?" And I was, well, that would be amazing. I used to coach basketball. So this idea of like mentorship and leadership has always been strong for me. And the thing I noticed is that through my conscious living, through my creating emotional safety for my children, I was like, oh, that's what's going wrong in my marriage. I'm not creating emotional safety in my marriage. I'm complaining. I'm critical. I'm negative. This is never going to get me what I want. And so started using these same things in my marriage and started seeing it improve alongside, my children's behavior. And that was like a light bulb moment for me. I was like, this is what I've always wanted. I've always just wanted a happy, healthy marriage and like kids I enjoy. I mean, it's not popular to say that anymore, but I was like your normal woman. That's just what I wanted, right? And so once I started making that transition in my marriage and creating the happiness I wanted, I was like, I got to teach this to other women because this is clearly a normal problem. Nothing was wrong with my husband. Nothing was wrong with me. This was like normal stuff that we all go through. Um, And so I started reading a lot more books, doing a lot of more research, and I started offering my services. And immediately women would come up to me and go, yeah, my husband's driving me crazy, but like, I don't want to tell anybody because it feels rude to talk about this stuff publicly. I don't want to disrespect him. I know he's essentially a good guy, but I'm like emotionally crumbling here and I don't want to get a divorce. So
Mm.
that's what brought me to doing what I'm doing. And this is my vocation. Now for me, it's motherhood and this work. It's equally important. It's something that I could just do for the rest of my life because it's so much fun. And yeah, I think that tells the story.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing, and it gives me so much context. And while I work to actively listen to you, I admittedly have so many different questions forming in my mind. And one that I would love to unpack with you right away is this idea of um, your offer being specifically for women. And something that you said is, and I think this is true for a lot of men, and we can go down this rabbit hole as to why this
Mm-hmm.
is predominantly the way, and again,
Yeah.
general statement, but predominantly the way in North America with men. Um, but men not wanting to have those conversations and men not wanting to talk about the tough stuff and they want to talk about emotions. Again, this is a hasty generalization, but probably one that's pretty accurate for a large percentage of, um,
Mm-hmm.
I would say, more heterosexual men. Again,
Mm-hmm.
broad stroking statement, but
Right.
um, how does it how does it work in the sense that uh, and my therapist told me way back when a relationship isn't 50-50, it's 100-100, right? So if a woman comes to you and she's opening up and sharing about struggles, emotional, mental, whatever it may be that she's experiencing, and attributing a lot of that to her relationship, how do you fix something that is so dynamic and involves two people and their past and their ideas and their biases and all their paradigms? How do you just work with one without bringing the other along for the ride, or is that part of the process at some point as well?
That's a great question. And no, then the husband never has to come along for the ride. Sometimes we even do it in secret, which makes it more exciting.
Okay.
It's kind of like an experiment. I'm like, you don't even have to tell him what you're doing, and you'll still see the results. So first of all, it works actually really, really well when just women do the work. There's also coaches who work just with men, which also can work really, really well. But what I see is that I want to go back to what you said about generalization. So we are talking about the normative middle of the curve, heterosexual men and women. It bears out in the literature. More women read self-help, more women go to therapy. And the typical situation you'll find is woman drags man to therapy because she's not happy.
Mm-hmm.
Husband's not happy because she's not happy, right? So women seeking a higher level of emotional connection in relationships, and also women typically process through verbal means. So we want to talk, we want to express ourselves, we want to hear ourselves process these feelings, want someone reflecting them back. This is a instinctual way that women deal with things, and instinctually men deal with things physically through action, through just thinking on their own. And so that's why you'll have this resistance that comes up all the time of, I don't want to talk to, like I would say, when you ask him to go to therapy because you're unhappy with him, he's thinking, right, I'm going to pay somebody else to witness you complaining about what a loser I am. This is a trap. There's no way, like, forget it, right? But what women hear is, you don't care about me because I'm telling you I need to go to therapy with you, and you're saying no, which means you really are not willing to do anything to make this work.
Mm.
Something that a woman sees as obvious and very simple, external help about this, right? Most men will feel as an attack and a threat. And also a fundamental lack of faith in that mode of healing. Like, what is talking about it going to do, anyways? We're just going to, you've told me 100 times you're unhappy. That hasn't helped me, right? And now the person is going to basically get on your side and tell me how I'm wrong and bad. And sometimes it actually makes things worse. So there's a founded fear on the part of these men that we're going to go air our dirty laundry and come home feeling worse, right?
Mm.
That doesn't always happen. But what I would say is that couples therapy works well when both people are willing, right? because then he's going to be like, okay, I'm going to hear my side. I'm going to, take responsibility here. And you're both got that even playing field. But if you do drag a man to couples therapy, it's a bad sign of its effectiveness. It probably won't work that well.
Mm.
So how does it work? From what does a woman do that makes this big difference? Well, partly the reason it's so effective is because women do have this vision for the relationship that men typically don't come with, like more emotional intimacy, more emotional support. And so she knows what she wants. Like she's got a vision essentially. She's the emotional leader in the relationship. Where his vision is, I'm just going to go and do the typical masculine behaviors and you're going to appreciate me and that will be fine. Right? Like that will be enough. So women always say like, I have a problem and he says it's fine. And you're like, well, I'm not fine. So why are you fine? Like different expectations essentially of what this is going to look like. So when she takes responsibility that her expectations are actually beyond his, doesn't blame him for the fact that he's not needing the same thing she's needing, like it's okay that it's different, then she can essentially guide him, help him help her, like do the things for him so he learns what that means to support her in a deeper way.
Mm. So it's almost like a modeling that your clients begin to embody with the work that you're sharing. I'm guessing like practices and tools and perhaps like developing new beliefs and then bringing that into the relationship and modeling it. Am I on the right path or?
That's half the story. So that's what women will expect reciprocity. So I'm going to do this
Mm.
for you and you're going to do it for me.
Right.
And that doesn't pan out because of the different ways that men and women view reciprocity, right? If a
Mm-hmm.
woman buys you a pair of shoes, you buy her a shirt. Like you're going to one for one, right? You're not going to leave that hanging because that's going to feel bad, right? Whereas in a typical masculine and feminine dynamic, if a man, takes you out for dinner, you're just supposed to say thank you and enjoy it. You're not supposed to go and take him out for dinner next week. That's not how you create like an exciting romance with a man, right? And so men will do the same thing. Like just because she does your laundry, you're not going to go to her laundry next week. Like that's not a one-to-one equation.
Mm-hmm.
So partly the modeling is of self-regulation, appreciation, um, giving the other person the benefit of the doubt. I call it, keeping on your rose-colored glasses that you had at the beginning. Like assume the best of them. They're not trying to hurt you. They're not trying to be a jerk. But the part where it's not strictly modeling, but I encourage women to do less and appreciate more. So women are typically over giving. They're thinking, well, he's not giving me the attention or love I need. I'm going to do more for him, cook more for him, provide more attention or whatnot. And that actually doesn't work. That sort of backfires because it puts more pressure on him where you want him coming towards you.
Mm-hmm.
This is the law of polarity, and it's something that is established in romantic literature that you need like a masculine and feminine pole, and the masculine is pursuing and doing and initiating, and the feminine is receiving and enjoying and expressing. And this is something that is kind of under the surface because it sort of triggers people's political correct radars. But it's not actually just about men and women. Men and women hold masculine and feminine in each of them, whether heterosexual, homosexual, whatever. And the idea is you want to embody the pole that feels good to you. So your partner can embody the pole that feels good to them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's something I was hoping to bring up as you were describing it. It just reminded me so much of The Way of Superior Man. Have you read that book?
I have.
Yeah, and it is for me as a heterosexual white dude who's basically like the luckiest guy in the world. Um, it, and I say that because it's like just like what do I have to complain about? I have my own stuff, but it was so eye opening to me to understand uh, like you just stated, the idea that there's feminine within me, and I actually, as you're describing, and again, it's a general statement, I'm sure, because you deal with I'm guessing a multitude of personalities within the women that you work with, but for me, the feminine is far more um, palpable. It's like it really is. I embody that and I nurture that side of me so much. So in our relationship, my partner Lindsay and I, she definitely has that more masculine, where I have the more feminine, where I'm the one who's quick to, hey, let's talk, and what are you feeling right
Mm-hmm.
now, and
Right.
that's because of so much of my
Mm-hmm.
past and my upbringing and all of the,
Yeah.
for lack of a better term, the baggage, not negative, but just baggage, the stuff that
Conditioning.
we, yeah, that we bring with us.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but one thing I also wanted to touch on is I find it really difficult to be around any of my male friends that will come to me and say, "Oh, my wife is this, or she's that," or and I'm challenged by that because I feel like they're undermining the relationship. And I, I always think in those moments, and they're not that often because my friends generally don't have that way of being. But I wonder if it's undermining the relationship when they're coming to me and complaining about their partner as opposed to going to their partner and say, "Hey, this is how I'm feeling, and this is how what happened has impacted me." So, is there a potential in that siloing that there could be the undermining of the relationship where the guy's like, "I had no idea that this is something that you were interested in, and I'd love to be a part of it, but you haven't even told me about it." So is that a potential, and how do you mitigate the potential of that coming up where the the heterosexual male in this partnership may feel a bit, left in the dark or undermined a bit?
Particularly because of the work we're doing, or if women are complaining to their friends.
Uh, let's answer both.
Okay. So the complaining to the friends is a very bad idea for the most part if your friends are not in happy marriages. So there's a big problem nowadays. It's almost like contagious divorce, right? One woman is in a terrible relationship. She starts talking to all her friends about it because women need to communicate. So it becomes this big conversation. And other women start picking up her dissatisfaction and going, yeah, my husband does that too. Yeah, I hate that too. Well, maybe I should get divorced. Well, now that we're divorced, I get half to do what I want before we never kids at all. Right? Like it's it's really dangerous because you're not taking advice from people who have what you want, right? And women have a tendency to validate each other 100%. So no matter what it is, it's yes, you're right, he's wrong. And that's very emotionally supportive, and that's what women need is emotional support of validating the emotions. But it also means that you're telling only your side of the story, and you're talking to feminine essence people who are going to absorb that and just feel with you and be like, yeah, that's bullshit. It's just like, right? Like you end up in this really inflamed sense of entitlement and resentment from speaking to people who are also unhappy in their. So that's a real bad plan. Don't talk to women who are already mad about their husbands or lots of negative experiences with men in their lives. So sometimes I have a woman who's in a genuine abusive partnership, not even a partnership, abusive relationship, and she'll be really victimized by this person. But when other women hear the elements that reflect their relationship, just the bits and pieces, they mistakenly think it's the same thing when this woman's experience is way worse, right? So, like, I speak to women who are in abusive relationships, and sometimes I support them through that process. And I find it's really helpful to women to hear that, like, all men can be defensive, all men can be avoidant, like, all men could sometimes, take a criticism and throw it back in your face. That's sort of normal behavior. But men are emotionally abusive. They go looking for drama, like they create drama in the relationship. They're nitpicking, they're blowing things up. And women who have not been in a truly abusive relationship can't tell the difference, right? So
Mm-hmm.
they start thinking it's really bad. Um, and then as for speaking to me and not their husbands, in all cases they've tried to speak to their husband, and he's given them every indication he does not want to hear more about it. Um, and then after they work with me, the relationship improves so much that they're all happy. They're just like, that was fine. And here's the other part that I think gets missed in our. So therapy talk, it's a feminine element, right? Like you talked about, you like to talk to people, you like to have conversation. But what's missing in that bias is mystery. We
Mm-hmm.
don't need to tell everything that goes through our heads to our husbands. It's a bad plan. He needs to be curious. He needs to wonder once in a while, right? And marriage can erase that because you just have this mundane, boring kids on your face all day. Like, what happened to the spice of not knowing exactly what was going on in your head every second? So, what I think is actually a benefit of women working with me is they start creating this private life with me that they don't talk about. And then they change their behavior a little bit, which is enticing, right? So, it's actually helps.
Mm. I envision it being just the way that you describe it and the way that it manifested viscerally for you is like it almost becomes like play again.
Yeah.
What have been some of the challenges that you come up against? You mentioned working with women who are in abusive relationships, and obviously that can mean physical, mental, emotional. Um, how heavy is that for you, and how do you navigate that? And then I guess the next part of the question is, how do you re-energize after something like that? Like, what is your process?
Okay. Okay. So first of all, I don't work with women who are in physically abusive relationships.
Okay.
I, I'm not a social worker, or I don't have access to all those resources, and I want them to like run to that stuff. And so that's one thing I don't do. When women are in emotionally abusive relationships, I you really have to change your tack with that, because in a non-abusive relationship, a lot of this is about boundary setting. A lot is about just holding your ground, doing what you want to do, not collapsing into people pleasing. But when you're in an abusive relationship, that can escalate the abusive behavior to start getting powerful and holding your ground, right? So any of this advice I give, I try to remember to say, like, if your partner's truly abusive, you can't just run with this because it might get worse, right? You might bring out the physical abuse from being more empowered. Um, and then as for how do I recharge, this is calling. It doesn't exhaust me ever. Like, it doesn't matter how heavy it is. It doesn't matter how hard it is. I mean, that's not true. When people are going through divorces, or when they get that, like, this is over, just served me, like, I do feel a punch in the gut with them. I'm like, oh, shit, like, maybe we started too late, or, or this person is just, they've been like, this is often when I work with men. With women, the changes are really quick because women have, how do I put this? Men have short memories and women have a lot of influence, whereas women never forget. So once a woman has been hurt too many times, she has a very difficult time letting go of that pain and resentment. And so even if, like, I work with men sometimes, it's just kind of a side, I like it, but the men will change their behavior, and she's going, oh, you are different. And then she'll say, why did it take you so long? Why didn't you do this years ago when I was talking to you? Why are you listening to other people? You didn't listen to me. Like, she's just so cold at that point
Mm.
that it can be really hard to bring her back. And I always feel really bad when I see that happening, because these men were innocently not hearing her. They were innocently not getting it 3, 5 years ago, right?
Mm.
And I love working with them because it keeps me tapped into the heart of men when I'm working with women. Like, your husband is not ignoring you because he doesn't care. He's not forgetting the tasks you gave him because he doesn't care. There's other reasons for it, and don't take it personally. So, okay, so I got off track a bit there. So wheeling back, most of the time it doesn't exhaust me because I'm empowering people. So whether they're going through a divorce, or whether their partner is not changing because he's, one of these people who's actually kind of stuck in his abusive patterns, I'm still empowering them to live a better life in the context they chose. And that is so satisfying to me, to bring someone from a real victim mentality over to, like, I'm choosing this for these reasons. And I actually have the emotional resources to cope with what I've chosen.
Mm.
It's just invigorating to me. Like, it really lifts my spirit.
I love that. How cool is that? I always
Mm-hmm.
say, I don't always say because I say other things, but I say at times that if I could, and I'm not there yet, but if I could do what I do for free, I totally would.
Oh, yeah,
It's just like so in alignment, and like you said, it
absolutely.
just lights me up. I leave a meeting and I feel like I could punch the sky kind of thing.
Yeah, you're like Rocky coming down the
Yeah,
stairs.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
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 I'm a big fan of boundaries. I talk about it often
Mm-hmm.
with my one-on-one life coaching clients, and I also am finding it really beneficial in the consulting work that I do with my small and medium-sized business leadership groups. There seems to be this pushback on boundaries, and for, again, varying reasons. But I really encourage people to establish them, and establish them early in as many relationships as they can, um, for a multitude of reasons. But first and foremost, just to make their life easier and more enjoyable. And I also find people respect that a lot more when you have boundaries and you stick to them. Give me an example, if you can, practically, like maybe specific to a client that you're working with or not, but maybe some tips or tools of how people can, establish and integrate boundaries within their relationship, even if the relationship is great. How could you do
Yeah,
that?
that's a great question. And I agree with you. Boundaries are pretty much fundamental to any improvement. You have to start there. Um, so with women, typically, they don't understand. I had one client say, she goes, I'd never even heard of boundaries before I talked to you. Like it wasn't a concept. She felt like she had to please her husband. She had to make him happy. And so therefore, she wasn't allowed to upset him. She wasn't allowed to anger him, which meant zero boundaries. And so one of the things I start with is I say, let him be angry. It's okay if he gets angry, right? So my definition of boundaries, it's how you treat yourself. It's what you do with your own life, right? It's not about controlling anyone else. And so, for example, women will say, well, I can't do that because he'll get mad, right? Men who I talk to don't understand that because they'll let somebody be mad more often than women will. There's part of the reason you have these generalizations is because women are more agreeable than men on average. Agreeable people say yes when they mean no, right? Disagreeable people are more willing to disappoint you than themselves. And so this tendency towards agreeableness means that women will be intimidated by their husband's displeasure very easily. All he has to do is one of those, and they're like, fine, I'll do it, right? Like instant capitulation. So, say the boundary is that you don't want to do something, like you don't want to cook something for dinner, or you don't want to watch that movie right now, you don't want to come listen to him talk right now, right? And he says, come do this, or why don't he'll say it in the form of like a passive, like, hey, why don't you cook this for dinner? And it's some big elaborate meal you don't want to cook because you're tired and whatnot. The non-boundaried stance is, oh, fine, or I'm really tired, and then if he makes one more request, you do it, but you do it with resentment. And so my rule for women is, number one, never do anything you don't want to do. If you don't want to do it, don't do it, right? And if you know you will be resentful when doing it, definitely don't do it. So these are just kind of categorization for where your boundaries should be, because often there's just none of them. Like they just don't even have any boundaries. And then the next one is, if your husband gets upset about it, if you notice him being triggered by your stance or your lack of cooperation, ignore it. Pretend you don't see it. It's not a conversation. It's not anything you have to engage in. Let him have his grumble. It's not the end of the world. And partly that's because when women grumble, we're packing that away in our backpack of resentments. You don't want to ignore a woman's grumble. You need to ask her, what's going on? I'm here to listen, draw it out, right? But usually men will grumble and then forget about it. And now it's a new standard that you don't do shit you don't want to do. And boom, you have a better relationship because you're less resentful. This is why you don't even need to participate in the conversation with them sometimes, because you're looking for punishment if you draw out a man when he's still processing his emotions.
Mm.
Like that's not a good time to talk, right? Um, and so that's a good example of boundary setting there.
I have a practical example, and I hope this person, I won't use names, but
Yeah.
this person, they may listen to the podcast, they may not, but I hope they
Mm-hmm.
don't mind me sharing this. Again, it's a bit anonymous, but I'd love to get your take on this, and perhaps you can offer them some advice.
Sure.
So the female in this relationship uh, is looking for or wanting help with a myriad of things in their life, mostly like mental, emotional. So looking for like a counseling relationship or a therapy relationship. But there is fear that's holding them back in how their partner will respond. And they've even articulated to me, oh, they would just be so upset with me if I did it, or they wouldn't like that. What do we do in those situations where there's an obvious desire for someone to seek help, but there's so much fear, um, just to engage that? And before you answer it, the way I responded to this person is I said, and trying not to coach them because it's really not my thing. I'm not a therapist. Um, I said, like, look, if you were sick and you needed to see a doctor, would you go see the doctor? And this person's answer was, absolutely, I would. And would you be afraid of how the other person would react, or would they support you getting healthy? And they said, yeah, definitely they would. And I just said, well, what is the difference? Like, what is the difference? And they couldn't answer it. I think it was a bit of a, um, you know, a question with no answer for a reason. But
Right.
um, jump in here and let me know your thoughts on this, or if it's something that you even come up with yourself, where it's taken this female a lot of time to even get to your doorstep, if you will.
Um, yeah, that I like your response to that. I think that's really good because it comes into the realm of self-care. Like, this is something you need to do to take care of yourself. Are you going to let someone else's opinion about that stop you? Right? To what length will you stop taking care of yourself to avoid triggering or causing discomfort in somebody else?
Mm-hmm.
Um, this comes back to the agreeable thing where discomfort in somebody else is so uncomfortable for me that I will turn myself in a pretzel. I will go through burnout. I'll do whatever I have to do to prevent you from being uncomfortable. That I might have caused it, right? If there's any way we can construe that I caused that discomfort in you, I'm going to avoid it. So there's a couple things that's not uncommon, because if you have a typical masculine figure who doesn't believe in therapy, I love when clients say my husband doesn't believe in mental health, like it's like a
Right, right,
thing, right? Mental
right.
health doesn't exist. This is bullshit category people invented to take our money, and these quacks, they charge too much, and there's this huge triggering of like the finances are just being, poured down the drain to these people who just talk to you. How could you ever charge that much for talking? Right? And the women are going, I really need to talk to someone, like someone skilled who can actually hear me and offer this emotional support. Um, so it's tricky because you're often getting into the realm of finances here, right? Which is the hot button in relationships. So sometimes it really depends on what the financial arrangement is, and getting back to that. Do you have freedom to spend money according to your own values, or does it always have to match their values? That's an important one. And if you spent it, what would happen? What are you afraid? So this is important because different partners will escalate in different ways, and it will be a litmus test for how aggressive and coercive your partner is. If you have sort of grumble, that's sort of your typical, like, well, I guess she's not going to do it my way. I don't like that, but I'm going to get over it now. Or you're going to have retaliation and escalation. Fine, I'm not talking to you for 5 days. Fine, I'm going to, whatever, revoke your spending privileges. Like, you get a whole different scale of that freedom that women will exist in to do with their finances. Um, so it's kind of digging down to that, but I think it is common, and it's hard because that's what I teach them in the work we do, is how to do stuff for yourself, regardless if he likes it. So it can could be kind of that chicken and the egg conundrum, supporting them with it. But I also get into, like, what life are you going to have if it revolves around keeping him happy at the expense of keeping yourself happy?
Mm.
And in the end, you're not helping him. So this is where I bring it back to the agreeable women. When you do things for him and not yourself, in the end, you'll hate him for it. He doesn't want that. He doesn't want you resent him for all the ways you prevented his discomfort without even asking him, right? He won't like that, so I won't do it. He won't like that, so I won't do it. And now you're just seething, closed woman who wants nothing to do with him. What favor have you done him in the end?
Yeah, resentment is such a toxic thing, is it not?
Yeah, completely.
And can be avoided um, by doing what I love to do, which is communicating, just talking it
Mm-hmm.
out, right? So how much of what you provide as kind of like developmental pieces is around communication, or a lot of it, are you basically coaching a bunch of ninjas out there who are just they're
Mm-hmm.
serving themselves in the dark, not really in the dark, but you get the metaphor.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, or is it a case by case scenario?
I would say a lot of it is ninja. It's very much vote with your feet, I call it, take action. Do the things that are going to make your life good. And don't ask permission. Don't apologize. Just like go do it. And that's a revelation to women. They don't know that's an option, that you
Mm.
could just go out and be about yourself once in a while, because we're so skewed the other way, especially after children. I mean, children bring that out in us and tip us right off the scale of like neglecting ourselves. So first of all, I give them permission to do that. I consider communication an advanced skill. Like I feel like you need to build the foundation of your identity, your structure, your boundaries, your action before you get to difficult communication. Because if the energy isn't right in your body, the words won't come across right. So you
Mm.
can say things, but your resentment will be bubbling. Your fear of the wrong response will be bubbling. You won't be able to come with true receptivity and faith in this person that they care about you. And so then, and also you're going to be overly sensitive to rejection. So when you bring something to your husband that you know might be a bit triggering to him, if you're scared and you still are really relying on his emotions to regulate you, it's going to go downhill instantly. Before you even say anything, it's going to be felt in the room.
Mhm.
So when you say communication, I'm talking more about dialogue. The part of communication that happens at the foundation is expression and appreciation. So right from the beginning, the very first skill is just appreciate the hell out of your husband for everything he does right. Nothing is too small, nothing is too ordinary. Just thank him for all of it, because that lays that foundation where he can start hearing you again. If he thinks nothing he does is making an impact or working with you, he's going to start to create a narrative of nothing makes you happy, which means if you're asking me for something else now, I'm already turned off to this, right?
Mm.
So it's kind of like turning the ears back on through appreciation.
I love that. I've actually been probably again too much, but I'm so turned on by the idea and the power of praise and how I think it's such an art
Yes.
to be someone who's good at praising other people. And my motivation for embodying it within myself and my relationships, but then also coaching my clients through it is it I really feel like it's this, like you mentioned reciprocity earlier. When we praise someone else, it actually opens us up to more gratitude for ourselves. It's an interesting system that, and there again, there's studies on this. The more one praises others, the more they're open to feeling grateful for themselves because they've created and seen that in someone else. Um, is praise a you mentioned appreciation, but is praise something that you help your clients navigate because maybe they don't know how to articulate? And I'm such a fan of language and how
Mm,
words land and
yeah.
how words influence and how words
Yeah.
manifest. So are you helping your clients through what that could look like and maybe making it accessible to them if they're not used to that? What does that look like?
Yeah, definitely. So partly I start really easy because when we have not expressed things, it's hard to even get it out of our mouths. Like it feels awkward and weird because you're changing the rules in your relationship, and your partner might even give you a side eye the first couple times you do it. Like it's not always gonna feel good for either of you at first. They'll kind of be like, "What's happening?" Right? Um, but I teach them kind of power terms. Like with men particularly, you want to use words like provide and help and admire, right? I really admire the way that you are consistently providing for our family. Like his basically in the gendered stuff I offer, you're looking for the most bang for your buck. Like don't celebrate his new hairdo, celebrate his providing, right? Whereas if you're a woman, you want someone to notice you got a haircut, right? Like that actually matters a lot to us. And so women will end up, the golden rule doesn't work in relationships. We'll give to men what we want to hear, and then it'll fall kind of flat, and we'll be like, well, I'm putting all this effort in, it's not even making a difference, why do I try, right? We'll think the same thing. And so I kind of point out to them that the thing we're taking for granted in men is actually the things you want to focus on: the financial providing, the working hard, any kind of fathering behavior that is beautiful and lovely. You want to say it over and over and over again, because the ninja part of this is you're feeding people's self-image, right? Whether you're a man or a woman. The parts of us that matter to us that we want to be recognized for is where we want that praise to hit. That's where we want it to land.
Mm-hmm.
And so for instinctual manhood, again, we're talking about like evolutionary biology as well as conditioning over generations, right? So men have been expected to provide and protect their people. And now that that is becoming invisible because women can do so much of it, men are losing that sense of identity in that, right? And so just bolstering up that primary sense of worth, again, it lights people up. It's like, oh, great, this thing I've been doing all this time, running this little rat race with the boss I hate. If my wife sees it, now I feel good about it.
Mm.
Now it's me. We have the same thing with their home life rat race, you know, laundry, wipe bums, wash dishes, clean. And it's not to say men don't do that, but men don't carry the mental load of it the way women do almost ever. I don't think I've ever seen a man who carries the mental load of it the way women do. And so if you as a husband can be like, I see how hard you work. I know how exhausting this is. That's like balm to the soul. Like you get that this is not fun a lot of the time. And I'm doing it because I love you guys, right?
Mm-hmm. I just had this thought pop into my head, like I'm just downloading it, so I'm going to share it. Have you ever heard
Okay.
of Matthew Hussey?
Yes.
Yeah, and how he's like
Dating coach, right?
yeah, he's like, well, I look at him like he does so much, yeah, I guess dating coach, but he's a guy who teaches
Yeah.
girls how to deal
Yeah.
with guys. And I
Right, right.
just I'm such a fan of what you're doing, and I think you're such a beautiful human being, and I think you speak and communicate so well. And I just think to myself, like, why can't that be you, but for men? Do you know what I mean? So
Right, right.
you
Yeah.
have all this intel.
Hmm.
Not only are you a female, but you
Right.
work intimately with females, and it's almost I just pictured you like packing a room with hundreds of men going like, tell us, like, what do we need to be doing? Because we love that you're there as a resource, but we want to get ahead of this,
Mm,
and we don't want for our partners to uh, have to, quote unquote, have to come to you. We want to
hmm.
show up that way. I would really, um, I would bet that there's a lot of men out there that would sign up for something like that. Not to talk about business and how to make a
Hmm.
quick buck, but I really I see value. I see value in that.
Yeah.
And it just came to me as you were talking, and again, like I think you have such an intimate understanding of females. Again,
Hmm.
speaking more so the heterosexual relationships.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, anyway, little tangential there, so I apologize. Um, I want to respect your time, and I know you have a meeting shortly after this, so I don't want to take too much of your time. But I wanted to talk to you about resources that you mentioned. You started reading a lot of books. I myself am like passionately a fan of John Gottman and Julie Gottman and the work that they do and the books that they've provided,
Hmm.
the resources they provide. Is there anything else that you feel either women or couples could or should be looking at as far as resources, whether online or, like I said, books by certain authors? Is there anything that you find has been really impactful?
That's a good question, really good question. And thank you for what you said about the men's seminars. The men I work with, it's really great. It's really great to offer men that insight. And it's just finding them at the right season where they're open to it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, as for resources, it's so interesting because I've read so many books, and what I've discovered is that again, it's the timing and the placement of those resources. So, like, for example, I want to add a caveat with this because I find that it actually was detrimental to my marriage when I was reading too many books. Because I would read the Gottman books and they would say, this is what your husband does, this is what you do, and you do these little exercises together. And I'm telling you, that does not go over in many marriages. Like it doesn't. But the impression you get from these books is that that's what everybody's doing, and that the men who care about their wives do the books together because of course you get the books, so people will say, oh, you know, I got this card deck of questions, or I got this book, and women, we get so elated about this is going to have all the answers and our husband's going to figure it out, and he's like, you know, eye roll or like half-assed engagement, and then we get the wind blown out of us because we thought that was the only way.
Mm-hmm.
um but I want everyone to know that 80% of health self-help is read by women. So there are not a whole bunch of couples reading those books and doing them together. Even I read this book. Here's a book for men. Married Man's Sex Life Primer by Ethel Kay. Crass as anything, written for men, very good, spot on. In his foreword, he talks to the women who try to put this book around the house for the men to find, right? Because they're trying to plant these hooks. So that's good. The Way of the Superior Man for Conscious Men is really, really good. Um, John Gray, the Mars and Venus guy, he's kind of like passe, and people aren't listening to that stuff, but it's the basics, and it's really not rocket science. It's just uncomfortable to admit how different men and women are, and how we're not always speaking the same language. It can feel unfair to women. Partly this is because women have traditionally read men and have studied men, because that's been our role, essentially, right? Like, we have raised children and took the temperature of the room emotionally to keep things cool, and men have not been asked to do that. So women have this, again, these new resentments about how they're doing this work more often than men are. And I just want to say, like, it can feel not fair at first, but when you get the skills, you're empowered to such degree that there's no unfair after that. Because you probably know this, right? This is what I say men's four needs are: respect, appreciation, trust, and admiration, right? If you were getting those four things in your marriage every day of your life, would you not do absolutely anything for that woman?
Mm-hmm.
You'd be
Mm-hmm.
like, let's do it, right? I'm here. I like to provide. You appreciate me. You respect me. You admire me. You trust I'm making good decisions. It's just like, that's it, right? And so for the women who feel kind of like, I would have to do this stuff, it's good for everyone in the end. We all win. So I'm reading right now John Gray's book, Advanced, what your father couldn't tell you, what your mother couldn't tell you and your father didn't know. And it's advanced relationship skills. So this one I want to mention particularly because it's for people who are ready to do this work, and it's for both men and women. So it's interesting no matter who's reading it. And it's for women, how to teach your husband to listen to you and give you emotional support, which I think is the key missing element for the good enough marriages. They're not really bad, but there's this lacking, not being heard. Women don't feel seen, heard, and understood. So this is the basic skill I want to give you as people are listening: is you set him up for what's coming. I would like to share something with you. I would love it if you'd listen. You don't have to say anything. I feel really good after I get to express this stuff. It'll only take a few minutes. You start with 3 to 5 minutes. Don't give the long version the first few times, because you're building up a muscle. And then you get to create a relationship where you get a level of emotional support that is rare. Like, it is rare to people to have that, but just with those tools. And then for the men to understand why women need to continually express. We're not, no matter how happy we are, no matter how satisfied we are with you and our lives, the need to express is what lightens our backpack. It's what makes us feel okay to just get on with it in the day. Whereas what I've seen in my own marriage and in so many of my clients is that when a woman comes with a negative expression, it's taken personally. Why is she not happy? Why is she never happy? Like, does she always have to complain? Like, that's just life, and then men will either turn off from it or try to fix it. And that really is hurtful, when women are trying to share their heart, what's going on. And again, I know this can go both ways. I teach women how to listen and not interrupt as well. But yeah, that's a lot. I feel like I could say so many things.
No, that's great, and I'll be sure to put some of the books that you've
Yeah,
recommended, and perhaps come up with some more. I'll put them in the show notes for everyone
yeah,
to
yeah,
access
yeah.
as well. Um,
Hmm.
the last one I want to have you unpack for me and the listeners is I was married for 7 years, in a relationship for 10, and the majority of that time, and I believe my ex-wife would agree, but I don't know for certain, that it wasn't fun, it wasn't good, it wasn't a quote
Hmm.
unquote a healthy relationship. And I was telling myself for so long that, that's just how relationships are. They're not supposed to be fun. They're not
Right.
supposed to be. And I got to a point where, unfortunately, it ended up in us separating and getting a divorce. But I'm so thankful for everything that I took from that relationship. And I feel like I'm showing up better in the one that I'm in now, as a father and a partner, and much more in tune with my needs and boundaries, etc. But how many people do you think you don't get to talk to, because there is this belief that oh, relationships aren't supposed to be fun. Relationships aren't supposed to be sexy. Relationships aren't supposed to be invigorating.
Yeah.
Relationships are supposed to suck.
Yeah. It's such a good question. And I think we get two ends of the poles in the myth, right? The one end is marriage is hard work, it's suffering. You show your love by how long suffering you are. If you're willing to tolerate this bullshit for a very long time, that makes you a very good person, right? That's the traditional kind of like duty, obligation paradigm of marriage. And there's a lot of people, and I mean, even when my marriage was suffering, you know what my number one question was? Is this normal? Are my expectations too high? You know, because I was brought up, you know, traditional evangelical, through, you know, you're supposed to suffer, this is kind of part of your offering in a way, right? And so I wrestled with that a lot, and I know people do, because they're like, well, if this is normal, I should stick it out. That would be the appropriate thing to do. And if it's not, then what do I do about it? And then the other end of the spectrum is it should be easy if it's the right person, which is utter bullshit too. These memes that are like, when is the right person? It's never hard. They can read your mind. They always do the right stuff. And it's like, what fantasy is this? Like, stop selling people this nonsense as well, where it's actually the quality of the match that makes it effortless. That's not what makes it effortless, right? There's very, very few people who haven't gone through rough times, or, you know, haven't kind of questioned things or had to work through their own issues, right? So I think those are the two poles. And then there's also this stigma that if something is wrong in your marriage, that's shameful. It's embarrassing. Like, you're on the rocks, that's ugly. Like, don't ask for help. Don't tell anybody. Just like lock that down. That's like, ugh, no one wants to see that. And I think all those reasons are why people don't understand that you create an amazing marriage. This is something you build. So there's an element of it that takes conscientious effort and attention, though it's not suffering, right? And then there's an element where once you have paid your dues, once you've sowed the seed and you've watered and you've fertilized, it just gets easier. It just gets easier and easier, to where it's not hard work. I would not describe my marriage as hard work at all anymore. Um, I mean, we get triggered and have little flare ups, and then it's just gone, because the the credit bank is so full of love and appreciation and care and passion and fun. Like you said, this idea that the passion should just disappear after 2-3 years. Well, like, your honeymoon phase does end. I wondered that one too. Oh, that the honeymoon's over, honey. Like, stick it out now. I thought, oh my God, is this really what happens? That is what happens, but it doesn't have to happen, right? The normal trajectory of unconscious people who don't have relationship skills is like that, right? It peaks and then straight down for the rest of your life. But the Gottmans, I love, they talk about the inverted U theory. So you start really high, you have kids, drops off the map, you struggle through this low point, you learn about yourselves and each other, and then it comes back up and it just keeps getting better. But people aren't getting past that anymore because there's no models for this, there's no hope for this, and there's no skills to get there, right? But that's why you hire a coach. Like, my clients get there in 8 weeks. It's like, honestly, sometimes it blows my mind how fast it is. Last client, it was 4 weeks, and she's like, actually, I don't know what to talk about today because everything's fine. Like, all I told her to do was stop criticizing the way her husband did housework. That was like, just don't say anything, just like zip your lip and let him do it his way, and just set up your life to be happier. And then it's like, fine. So I I really appreciate that question, because it's really a tragedy how many unnecessary divorces happen, the ones where it would just take a couple of minor tweaks and it would be fine. It would be actually great. Like, it'd be better than fine.
Wow, amazing.
Mm.
Um, Thank you so much for sharing that and everything else. I'd love to do this again with you, like, frequently.
Yeah,
I think this would be healthy to do because it's
great.
such a great resource. And
Yeah.
I'd love to share more of this with my listeners. Um, if people are interested and they want to engage with you, how best they do that? Where can they interact and where can they reach out if what you're saying really resonates with them?
So first of all, I do a lot of my showing up on Facebook. So you can just friend me, Shiloh Minor. I'm absurdly extroverted, so I will friend anybody. And you can drop in and say hello, ask me your questions. I do a live once a week, where I love to answer people's questions if they, want me to answer a particular situation. So Facebook's great. I also have a website. If you'd like to just read my story, it's all on there, www.shilohminor.com. I have YouTube. If you're just like, I am anti-social media, check me out on YouTube. I know that Facebook has its drawbacks, but it's a great place to find people. But yeah, just reach out and just understand there's no pressure. Like you're like, I don't know if I'm ready for a coach, or some people say, I don't know if my relationship's bad enough for a coach. It's like, it doesn't have to be. All that has to be is that you have a desire and that you don't know how to reach that. That's the reason you hire a coach. So
Love it.
you can chat to me for as long as you want and don't feel like you're wasting my time.
I love it. And I want to say thank you so much publicly. Shiloh was kind enough a few weeks ago to help me through a bit of a gray, nebulous moment that I was having, and she just hit me with some very strong questions that felt so good to have someone pose and be there to receive the answers. So I wanted to take time today to say thank you so much. That was extremely appreciated and very powerful. So thank you so much. And you're very skillful in what you do. And I look forward to watching you facilitate more growth for yourself, your family, and your community. So thank you for what you do.
It's my pleasure. And I just want to say to you as well that modeling this conscious manhood is so important, because the reason that men don't want to talk about it or don't want to go to therapy is because it's viewed as not a masculine thing to do and also uncomfortable for them. So the more they see, heterosexual men, normal dudes, up there and being vulnerable and saying, yeah, I talk about stuff and I don't have it all figured out. And that's okay. That's part of being a man, not antithetical to being a man. I just think it's really, really valuable. So thank you for bringing me on your platform today. I would love to have more chats with you. It's been so much fun.
Yeah, definitely. Let's do it. Let's 100% do it. I think
Yeah.
there's ton of value, and again, so much more we could unpack. And yeah, I appreciate you sharing the last hour with me. That's it, guys. I want to say thank you to you as well for listening. If it wasn't for you, the show wouldn't exist. I always say it would just be Shiloh and I, which would be cool, but I feel like it's far more impactful that you guys listen to this show. So thank you. If you found it beneficial, it would mean the world to me and Shiloh if you would share it with someone else who you think would benefit from it. That is it. That's Shiloh. I'm Brad, and you guys have an incredible day. Be good to each other, and we'll see you next week for a brand new episode. We did it. Easy.
Yeah, that was awesome.